So on and so forth. Shalom Chaverim. Welcome to another episode of On the Road to Zion. Today I have a very special guest with me. This is Mikey Darwish. He's a DJ, music producer, and an audio engineer. Do I know the difference between any of those three things? Well, that is definitely one thing that I am going to ask about because I have no idea. At some point, engineer became attached to something in the music industry, and I don't know if that's fake. So Mikey is going to tell me if it is. As you know, we bring on people here who are somewhat doing either in the content space or are creating something, and we are here to hear their story. So Mikey, who, by the way, does not have a DJ name, despite the fact that Mikey D is like right there, or Big Mike, Big Mikey D. There are literally so many combinations, and instead he just goes straight with his name, Mikey Darwish. Thank you for being here.
Thank you for having me. I really appreciate it.
Yeah, of course. So I think, I'll get to the name thing because I'm curious about that. But more so than anything, as we always start off, why don't you tell us your story?
So, my name's Mikey. I'm a Lebanese Jew from Brooklyn, New York. I grew up Orthodox, been going to Jewish school all my life, all that stuff. And basically, I'd say life took a turn around COVID time. I definitely got addicted to TikTok like most people, if I'm going to be real. And then I started seeing an influx of content, that was geared more towards me, in the sense that, my dad was sending me a lot of like videos of Lebanese things. And once I'd get those videos, it would turn to a lot of independent creators who were not very fond of us as a people, and it would kind of get a rise out of me. So eventually I took the bait and started making a bit more Jewish content. And that's kind of where I got my start in the whole content space and the whole, thing. And then I've also been DJing since I was 12. So I'm like, what would be a fun way to combine the two? Let me see where my niche is at. And I'd upload videos of me like ranking my favorite Mizrahi music, my favorite Israeli like pop music, Israeli rap music, and I'd get a ton of hate for it. I would get a ton of hate for it. It was really it was fun, for like a year and a half. And then I kind of cut down on that and tried to, focus strictly on music or strictly on sports, because I do upload stuff about sports too, but it's just now my TikTok is a cesspool of whatever's on my mind to talk about.
So why don't you then, if I can get like kind of the timeline, you said you've been DJing since you were 12. When would you say that you kind of like determined for yourself that like this was going to be your pursuit? What year?
I think right around the time I was graduating high school, I got a lot more interested in the back end of music.
Okay.
So I went to Israel for the year. I did like a gap year in yeshiva.
What year was this?
This is 2018 to 2019.
Okay.
So I did a gap year, and after my gap year, I had ended up signing up for, a music technical program that was it was a 4-year program. And for some reason, throughout all my registration, all the classes that I wanted to take were full by the time I wanted to register for them. So I never took any classes that interested me in that change. And then once I found out about the audio engineering school that I graduated from, I applied, did the whole program, went through it, and all of a sudden I got a certification in Pro Tools, which is the industry standard program you use to mix and master music. That's basically more or less of what an audio engineer does. I'd say like it's definitely part of it.
This is a good segue. This is a good opportunity to tell everybody and explain so that way they don't have to look stupid. I'm doing everybody here a service. What would you say is like the difference if someone says like I'm a DJ, someone says I'm a music producer, someone says I'm an audio engineer? Like what is the individual kind of like person that does each of those things?
So in my opinion, for me, it all works hand in hand because everything coincides with everything. But a
Okay.
DJ is someone who mixes music that's already made and is playing music to a crowd, to a live stream, whatever it might be, what may have you. A producer is someone who's making, composing, arranging music, and creating the sounds that are being played by DJs. And then audio engineers are the people who are listening to all the music. They're not necessarily doing production per se, but they do mixing and mastering, which is cleaning up and editing music when the composition is done and the arrangement is done, and making it ready for release, essentially by doing processes called mixing and mastering. Mixing is basically changing frequencies in bass or treble, mid-range, and that's just one part of it. Also, trying to, if you need to get a sound on like an instrument sounding better or more prevalent, you're able to do that through engineering. And spatial effects like reverberation, delay, echoing, all that stuff. That's what
So it's kind of like, yeah. So music producer is the one that's producing the music. They're like pushing the buttons that creates this sound and creates this sound and
they're
puts them
playing
together.
piano, they're doing all that stuff.
Right. And then you, as an audio engineer, take that like quote unquote finished product, or what is just about to be a finished product, and polishes it, make sure that it's all set. And then the DJ is like, thanks so much for doing all this work. Like, I'm going to go and like take this finished product and this finished product, and I'm going to create two new finished product, or like a brand new one. But that's like essentially kind of using both. And you do all three of those things.
Yes.
Well, there you go. So I would say, to me, that feels like a Renaissance man type of like thing. You're right. You're not just producing music, right, but not playing it, right? Like, yo, man, you go do it, right? You used to play music.
I grew up in a very Lebanese household, so I had music around constantly. Like my dad, the first gift I ever got from my father was the iPod brick.
Oh, okay.
He taught me how to use LimeWire to get a bunch of music.
Oh my god! Wait, how old are you?
I'm 24. People think
I can't believe that you're 24 and that you know LimeWire. Like I'm 30, about to turn 34, and I grew up doing LimeWire. Like by the time that you, like 10 years difference means that you had like Spotify available to you when you were a teenager.
Spotify was a big turning point in my life, I'll tell you that much. But like growing up, it was always like LimeWire. And
that's so funny.
When I was learning how to use LimeWire, my dad would genuinely show me everything, and he loaded my iPod with a bunch of music he used to listen to back in Lebanon. Also, my dad's a big aficionado on like world music, so a lot of people.
Well, so can you tell me a little bit more? And then, like, clearly, it seems like your dad has had a fairly significant, influence on you, and also being, a Lebanese Jewish family. I think that a lot of people, kind of know the all-encompassing term around Mizrahi, or the all-encompassing term around Sephardic. But if you would maybe go a little bit deeper into the Lebanese side of your Lebanese Jewish background, and kind of like how that plays into your experience here in America, and also maybe how that has influenced your music, obviously, and just the way that you approach Jewish content.
Of course. So I'd say, the way I was raised was just very, I grew up modern Orthodox for the most part. So
Your dad's from Lebanon, by the way, just as a...
Born and raised in Beirut, yes.
Okay.
He lived there towards the end of the Civil War.
Okay.
So
sorry, continue.
He's one of the Jews that like stayed through a majority of the war. My mom's side, on the other hand, her parents left Beirut before she was born. And they moved elsewhere. I'm not gonna get into it, but basically with the way my father grew up and the way he was in his life, when he was raising me and he was raising my little sister, we would basically grow up listening to a bunch of Arabic music. When I tell you a bunch, I mean even not just from Lebanon, from different countries. Like very prevalent in our house was a singer who goes by the name of Nancy Ajram. She is one of the most popular female singers, not only in the Arab world, but in the world in total. She's on like the list of the 100 richest like women in the world, which I think is crazy. And her impact like in my music and my life growing up is immense. I still listen to her music in the car when I'm by myself, and it's like she's honestly a visionary. She always made good music, and growing up having that in my life was just it was very powerful because her music is also so powerful. She talks about a lot of different topics, romance, government, just everything surrounding life, and it was one of the most wonderful artists I've ever listened to in my life.
That's beautiful. And so do you speak and sing fluent Arabic?
My Arabic could definitely be way better. I'm going to be honest, but I'm very conversational with it. Like I can get around the conversation decently, and I understand. Like especially when my parents speak to each other in Arabic, I pick apart their sentences, and I'm trying to hear words that I might recognize to see what's like on the topic. So,
And so then, how did your parents meet? So, because your dad was obviously still in Beirut, and through until through the end of the Civil War almost. Your mom, was born somewhere else. You obviously can tell us what you feel comfortable telling us. But how did they end up meet?
They met in New York. My dad and my mom have a mutual friend who's actually our neighbor now. Funny enough, and they met at her birthday party, and my mom had been dating someone else at the time.
Ooh, scandalous.
And my dad was actually very cool with this ex-boyfriend. My dad was very cool with him, and then
that ex-boyfriend is very cool with him.
I don't even know who he is. But basically a few things changed in their life with the relationships, and my dad was living with the person my mom used to work for. So
okay.
She ended up coming to his apartment, and that's when they started like becoming friends, and then things happened throughout.
Right. The rest is history.
Dating. Yeah.
That's awesome. And then you said that you have a little sister as well.
I do have a little sister. She's 3 years younger than me, and she is the smartest person I know. Probably the most driven person in our whole family, if I'm being honest. But yeah.
And so, do you see a difference being like kind of the elder son, and obviously as years go on with assimilation, everything like that, do you see any difference between, like, for instance, you and your sister in terms of your relationship to the Arabic side or the Arab side of your family's history? Does she speak more or less the same amount of Arabic as you do? Is there any kind of differences there?
I think it's more of the same because we both grew up the exact same. Also, our grandparents were very big on like speaking Arabic to us when we were growing up. They would give us words of affection in Arabic all the time. And one thing, my great grandfather, I was lucky enough to have him for the first 19 years of my life.
Wow.
He had a very hard time speaking English. It wasn't always easy to communicate with him, but we knew like he loved us a lot, and he was just one of the best people. So I learned a lot of Arabic through him telling us like all the things he would tell us. Also, my grandma, every week she'd cook for Shabbat. Kitchen was pumping with music. So having her in our life was always important. My mom's mom, by the way, I feel like I should mention, she is like the pillar of my life. The pillar of my life, and I owe so much to her as well.
And you can tell me if you don't know, like, in Ashkenazi families, a consistent theme that you will hear amongst anybody is, I have a grandfather who was in the Holocaust, but I can't tell you anything about it. He refuses to tell me about it. Or now, especially as most Holocaust survivors are passing away, you start to hear things like, oh yeah, he wouldn't talk about it until the end of his life. And I'm wondering if, for you, as someone who from a Mizrahi family, from a Lebanese family, you have a certain also history, right? And I think that we forget about that a lot in terms of what it was like for the Jews in the Arab world. Obviously, they didn't go through the Holocaust, but they were nonetheless victims of significant Jew hatred to such a degree that they were forced to flee. And you're talking about, you knew your great grandfather, right? So if you think about when your great grandfather was born and the life that he knew and what it meant to live in Beirut with this Jewish community that had really been in the area for so long. And now you have your great grandparents, your grandparents, and also your dad as well, who had to leave. And so did that impact at all? What's some of the similarities that somebody maybe from an Ashkenazi family could relate to, or that they wouldn't know, that you would want to kind of explain to them, or really anybody that is understanding of what does it mean for this generations of Jews that ends in Lebanon, that ends with your parents, grandparents, and great grandparents?
That's actually a really good question, but also a tough one at the same time, because I guess I can say I was definitely lucky enough to have all four of my grandparents. I had my grandma's parents, so my great grandparents, and my mom and dad in my life, who are all immigrants. I'm a first generation American. And essentially, with that, they will always tell you life in the old country, life in the old country. This happened when I was there. We had to do this to get this, do that to get that. And the way they spoke about Lebanon, they would never disrespect Lebanon because they spoke of the country so highly. But then once the war happened, it seemed like a lot changed for them, as people who lived in the country. And it seems crazy to me because when I look at my dad's old documents, my dad still has his Lebanese. It's not even a passport technically. It's a laissez-passer, which is a document from the United Nations that enables non-citizens of the country to travel. My dad was not allowed to be a citizen of Lebanon because his father was born in Baghdad. And
Wow.
he left Baghdad because of the Farhud.
Hmm.
So my father, he's now a citizen of Italy, I should mention. So is my
Oh,
mother.
interesting.
Yeah,
We're
so
just peeling back the onion, just more and more.
peel back the onion. That's kind of where I get, my love of Italian sports from. Maybe more on that later. But maybe get into it. But it's yeah, no, my mother and my father, they both have Italian passports, and that's where I thought it was really interesting, how they get them. The story they gave me is that a lot of European Union countries were looking for stateless Middle Eastern people. So a lot of the main stateless Middle Eastern people were Jews who were fleeing Arab countries or forced out of Arab countries. The cool thing about Lebanon is that their Jewish population is the only one that grew post Israel's creation.
That
So
makes it, yeah. Well, I wonder if that actually doesn't surprise me now that I like take a moment, just because up until basically the last 30 to 40 years, I mean, it was a 50-50 country of, Muslims and Christians. And, historically, it's been the only Christian majority nation in the region that has a, different relationship with its Jews than, Arab Muslims. And so that doesn't necessarily surprise me. And I think that it's also something that, I wish that, hopefully that type of history kind of like lends itself back into maybe a reset in the near future.
that's the hope for a lot of people in the region, because the Jewish population in Lebanon, the more I look at it, especially my dad was interviewed for CNN about this exact topic.
Okay.
He went very in depth with it. I can send you the interview after this episode.
Please. Yeah.
But he mentioned something very important in that episode, and it's a quote that actually sticks with me that he mentioned. Jews are very prevalent on saying this one word called l'chaim, right? To
Mm-hmm.
life. But in Lebanon post Civil War or during the Civil War, there was no life. There is no Jewish life. Who is leading the community? Who wanted to stay? What reason was there to stay? And that stuck with me a lot because it makes me think, could life have been different if the war never happened, if the economy wasn't so poor that they had to move to America for different opportunities? And that's something that I always have in my head, because that's my dad for you, someone who's very prominent in his thought and very well spoken.
And so how does that how has that kind of impacted you over the, really especially since October 7th and maybe even before, as you were kind of mentioning at the beginning, around, some of the content that, you're getting in. You're like, my guys, like I speak, decent Arabic. I listen to Lebanese music. I'm Lebanese, like I am Lebanese. I just so happen to be Jewish, and yet, if someone were to put you up on the airport, TSA is just as likely to, put you off to the side as a Lebanese Christian or Lebanese Muslim. So how has that made you? How's that impacted you? Since you got onto TikTok and you started making content.
Before I answer this, the TSA joke isn't really a joke. It's happened to me a couple times. But no, I think it's also a really good question, because when I was seeing this, I'm like, this person and I speak the same language. We grew up the same, listen to the same music, possibly even eat the same food. Like, why all of a sudden where's the disconnect?
Yeah.
And that's the question. Where's the disconnect? You always want to have prosperity in the region, and you want people to get along with everyone. And then the more I look at things, I'm like, is it Israel, or is there something deeper here? Because I can't answer that. I grew up the same as these people who don't like Israel. I probably eat manusha at the same time in the morning as these people. Like, come on here.
Like everything is the same, like I eat the
Really,
same food, I drink the same tea, I listen to the same music, but yet I don't hate you, but you hate me.
the only difference is I go to pray on Saturdays. You guys are going on Friday and Sunday. That's it. That's it.
Yeah.
I don't see a reason to be fighting or have hatred in your heart just because someone thinks a certain way.
Has that also had it, what was the impact, I guess, of like Israel on your family and also you? Because so often the talking point will be like, oh well, every life was perfectly fine for Jews before Israel, and then it was the creation of Israel that made Arabs start to hate Jews, and so that's why they all of a sudden had to flee from all of their places. Aside from that, is that something that your parents and grandparents and great grandparents would somewhat agree with, not agree with at all? What about, and for you yourself, like where do you kind of like fall in line, on that? Because a personal experience for them might be very different than what we might say from the outside.
It's funny you actually mention it, because recently, my dad's father passed away from COVID at its height in 2020, and
Sorry.
that was an eye opener for us. But also, what I thought was very interesting was, as soon as he passed away, my dad was finding a bunch of different ways to honor his legacy. And my grandfather had owned a bunch of Sifrei Torah that were left in Lebanon. My father recovered those. My father recovered the Sifrei Torah that were from Lebanon, brought them back to America, got them fixed by a sofer, so someone who writes Torahs as his job, and we restored them essentially and donated them to two synagogues. So we have a Lebanese synagogue in Brooklyn that I used to attend regularly. I don't anymore because I have a new synagogue around the block, so it's just much more convenient to go there. And we donated one of the Torahs to that synagogue, and then another synagogue in Deal, New Jersey, where we know it's going to be used.
That's
So
awesome.
it was, when I saw those Sifrei Torah, I was like, wow, this is actually amazing. And we could only have those Sifrei Torah through the IDF during the Lebanese Civil War, smuggling it into Israel. And my dad used to spend summers in Israel. He has his aunt there, his uncles, his closest cousin moved there in 2014. Every time we have to call for holidays and Shabbatot, we're always on top of it, making sure we wish them well. And growing up, we've always known that like Israel is a part of our life. It's a part of the way we live.
Hmm.
And we have to be concerned, maybe not politically, but at least just for our family safety. And that's always how I grew up. Because the more I think about it, especially with my family that moved from New York to Israel, that's when I started caring more, because I was very close with my dad's closest cousin's kids. We grew up together and we would hang out all the time. Once they moved to Israel, and that's when I think I started caring a bit more, because that's my family, that's my blood. And I always say I'll do anything for my blood.
And so, for your personal relationship, you took a gap year. You obviously have family there. What has been kind of, your attitude toward Israel before October 7th? Did it change, or, has it always been the same?
I think before and after it really hasn't changed. It's always been my favorite country on this planet, and I love going on vacations there. Love just being there, and I truly realized how much I loved it the last time I was there. So early March this year.
What was so different about this particular trip, or what happened?
So my cousin Mark was getting married for this specific trip. That's why I went. And Mark and I were glued to the hip since birth. He's a month older than me. He's born in July. I'm born in August 2000, so same year. And we've been glued to the hip since we were kids. I had went out after his wedding to the beach. I came home, but I didn't want to go to bed right after I came home. I just went out to the beach because my hotel was on the Tayelet in Tel Aviv. I just went out, went to go look at the water, and I was like, I don't even think I realize how much I love this country. Like the more I come here, every time I come here, it's always like it feels new and it feels fresh. Like there's something I haven't seen before, even though I know this place like the back of my hand at this point. I lived here. Done. I did my bar mitzvah there. I saw everything I've always wanted to see, and the more I come there, the more I connect with my family and their friends. I always feel like it's a new experience. And every time I just fall more and more in love with the place.
It's beautiful. And so, to bring it back full circle, how has all of this impacted the way that you make music? You explained a little bit at the beginning, but go a little bit deeper into, you were talking about that one woman who, was one of the most powerful influences on your music. You're talking about the Levitt.
Yes.
Yeah, so
Okay.
like when you're making music, right? When you're sitting there, right? Because again, you're the Renaissance man. You can, start, finish and play, right? So when you in every part of the process, where does all of this come together that helps you say, this is what I'm going to create today?
So funny enough, actually, this is 10 years ago, actually. Not to the day, but 10 years ago. I was working on music with a friend of mine from high school. His name is Charles Zaytouni. He's also Lebanese, but his parents are born and raised in Israel, so different upbringing. He had more of an Israeli upbringing. We were working on music together since we both started, and the first song we ever released was like it was an ode to our Lebanese roots, and it was the most beautiful thing ever. We loved how it came out, and it was a dance music song that we automatically switched on our heads. We called it Beirut because why not? It was fun to make too. Like the process of making it was really fun because we also had a friend of ours named David. He taught us how to DJ and make music, and he was just so instrumental in the help and helping us find, the darbuka sounds or the oud sounds that we wanted to use. And
Yeah, where do you find those like samples? Like where do you go out and put it together?
so there's this service online called Splice.
Okay.
It's a website that is essentially priced around the same as Netflix. It's the price of a Netflix subscription, and you get a certain amount of credits per month to download samples. So what I do is I keep paying for it, but I don't use it until a certain month. So I accrue enough credits to download thousands of sounds.
Okay.
And when we started paying for Splice long before we even thought of making the song. So once we even got to that point where we were like, we need this sound, that sound, everything here, we were like, okay, hold on a minute. Now we have all these credits. let's spend it on anything that sounds Arabic and try and fit it in. It was a good day that day because especially when David taught us about splice and he was like teaching us how to source your sounds and how to get everything without having to manually record it, which was a breath of fresh air. It was just very helpful.
This is all still for the song Beirut.
Yeah.
And so what about today, in present day, as you're making music today? Where do your influences come from? What kind of music would you say that you're making? The same type of music, or would you say that you're making a little bit more Israeli type of music?
I'll be honest, I've always been making dance music. That's never changed. Since I started DJing, my love has been to house music mainly, but now my sound has drastically changed because I've been getting more influenced by the modern day scene in Berlin.
Can you explain that for, I obviously know what you mean by that. So, but for the listener out there, could you please explain?
So in modern day Berlin, there's a very popular club known as Berghain.
Okay.
This place is a warehouse that is turned into a club that has the best techno DJs in the world playing there every day, nonstop, 24/7. And it is so exclusive that to get in, the bouncer has to essentially say, you are the vibe of what we want in this place. Come in. So with that Berghain sound and my Middle Eastern influences clashing, I'm trying to at least work on an EP so I can show this new sound that I'm like working on and formulating.
What is it about this? What is it about? I don't mean to cut you off, but like, what is it about this Berlin music that is like, because like I can imagine like German hard techno with the flowy and kind of like what I imagine to be Arabic style music. What is this like desire to figure out a way to put these two together?
I think it's a niche that just hasn't been tapped yet.
Hmm.
And really in music you need to stand out to fit in. So that's where I think the idea comes, because I want to reach that niche of people who enjoy both types of music very much. And I have a lot of people around me that enjoy both individually. Why not bring it together?
Very true.
Already there are a lot of Arabic songs that are very fast in BPM, 145, 150 beats per minute, that I can take and make a remix of. Or I can take inspiration from those same songs, drag it into a new project, and just be like, I like how this sounds in this track. Let me manipulate it or toy with it, sample it, something like that. I just want to hit that niche that like makes.
You're just like, I just want to scratch that itch.
I've never heard this before, and this is what I think needs to be not a standard, but something that needs to be put out there for the masses to want to hear.
For sure. And so then how does that kind of like come into play, with your Jewish content, right? Because, most often, what I've been, when I've been interviewing a lot of people, they've been trying to integrate their Judaism more into their art, right? That they weren't, doing very Jewish art. Now they're doing more Jewish art, or they were already doing Jewish art, but now they're doing like different kinds, and it's being even more influenced. And from you, like what you're telling me, is that like that's kind of like not your focus, or at least this particular passion project has to do with this. Is there another piece to your music that is kind of focused on on Judaism, or integrating more Jewish, art into your art? And also, as you were saying, like, you're doing more Jewish content creation. So where are you bringing those two together?
If I'm going to be honest, yeah, I think
it's the only way to be on this podcast. Say again?
Judaism is just my brand. It's who I am. I live my life every day with a Jewish life. I'm never going to stop, being Jewish. Also, the whole thing, if we're talking the Middle Eastern music, who loves Middle Eastern music more than Israelis? There's a certain DJ who's been going crazy on social media. His name is Zahavi. He is brilliant. He plays oud during his DJ sets. And he showed himself he showed a video of people building his studio. He has a nice little studio, and then on an instrument rack, just a bunch of ouds and like different Arabic instruments. And I'm like, this is the type of guy I would want to collaborate with a million times out of 10. Because
So I want to double down on that. Hold on, because so you said something so interesting, which is that like I am Jewish. Like I don't like that. I live like I'm never gonna not be Jewish, and I think that you know so many people are trying to be more outwardly Jewish because they weren't, they didn't feel connected to Judaism, so now they're wearing more Jewy jewelry, right? Or they're getting a tattoo, or they're like trying to do this. But for you, instead of kind of like making it as a part of your everyday, you're just like, this is who I am. Like I don't need to make Judaism a part of my art to feel Jewish or to be a proud Jew. And I don't know if I maybe got that wrong or not, but I would love for you to kind of expand on that.
I just came back from San Diego yesterday, where I was, for the first time ever in my life, flown out and paid to perform at an event. And this event was for Yom HaAtzmaut. I never said yes faster in my life to an offer like that. Not because the money was, that's out of the question. I wanted to represent myself the best way I know. I grew up years of my life Jewish school. That's all I ever went to. I never heard of public school. Didn't know what it was. I grew up every Passover doing the full process of yachatz in Arabic. My great grandfather, before he passed away, would sing a song while he split the matzah in Arabic. Every year, you pass the afikoman around, and then you get asked in Arabic, where did you come from and where are you going? I grew up all my life with Judaism being the priority and the first thing on my mind. God is always the first thing on my mind. And that is, I think, the beauty of it all, because just because, my culture and the way I was raised was very Arabic and very Lebanese doesn't mean my religion doesn't coincide, because it definitely does.
That's beautiful. Sorry, I was like, I think that's so powerful, and I think that it's something that people need to hear more often, because I think that so much of, especially the American Jewish experience, is, and for so many Jews, I think after October 7th, who are trying to, convince everybody to be more outwardly proudly Jewish, and they do so by making it a part of their art or wearing it on their sleeve or anything, or making more statements or anything of the sort. And for you, at least to me, it feels like it's the most internal thing ever, that you don't need to do anything else, because it is so profoundly integrated into who you are as a person. It doesn't even come into question.
First thing anyone has to know about me. Oh, I'm Jewish. I can't do this on this day. Unfortunate.
And
Literally, will always tell people I put my religion first, because that's my direction in life.
so going back to your great grandfather, where are you from? We know. So now, can you tell us, where are you going?
Where am I going?
Where are you going?
To the moon. To the moon, baby. I'm no, you never know where you're going. Life changes day by day. And I think the beauty of it all is that, one thing a lot of Jews say, everything is in Hashem's plan. I'm the firmest believer in that statement. Whatever God plans for you is what's going to happen for your life, but obviously you need to put in the effort as well. You need to put in the work to do it yourself, because no one's going to help you on this world. No one's going to help you in this world besides yourself. And the more trust you put into God while you're working hard, you will get to where you want to be. And I'm such a firm believer in that, always.
That's beautiful. Well, on that note, I think I want to, I guess, wrap up. Is there anything else that maybe I didn't touch on before I do so, though, that you want to put out there, that you want to make sure that people are aware of, about the DJ, music producer, audio engineer, Mikey Darwish?
In reality, all these labels, they're just arbitrary at the end of the day. One thing you have to know about me is anyone, whatever you want to tell me, regarding your story, I'm always here to listen. I love hearing different people's stories. I love hearing what different people have to say about, their experiences with Judaism or their experiences with certain things in the Middle East. I'm always willing to listen because someone's story could turn into a song for me. Like it's happened before. But everything at the end of the day is your destiny, and whatever happens in your life, be appreciative to the man upstairs, because he's going to help you get through everything.
Amen. So I guess, because as a, you're not the normal content creator who's just, on Instagram or whatever, where should people actually go to find you and to support you?
Where
Other than
else?
Instagram, there's like, if there's a SoundCloud, is SoundCloud still a thing? I don't know.
Of course,
Like,
SoundCloud's still a thing. I just put a
I don't
mix
know.
up. I put a mix up on SoundCloud today. Actually, I
Okay.
uploaded my set from San Diego's Yom Ha'atzmaut party
Okay.
onto my SoundCloud this morning, which you should go listen to.
I'm going to.
But obviously, Instagram and TikTok are the best ways to connect with me and support me. And
Spotify as well.
soon come. I don't
Soon
have an
come.
actual page yet.
All right, good to know.
Also, another thing, like, because with Spotify, I also build playlists, so my personal Spotify profile is always open. If you guys want to discover some music, my Arabic playlist on there is actually called ancestry.com. I made like little.
I'm gonna go check that out. I want to see that. I want to see what's up.
It was while I was in audio engineering school that a lot of my playlist names changed because I had a classmate who had fire playlist names, and I was so jealous of him. I'm like, I hate what I'm calling my playlist. I'm changing everything. So yeah, Spotify is a great place to discover new music if you want to look at my page. And SoundCloud is where you'll find a lot of my mixes. I'm gonna have a new one coming up on Sunday as well, because tomorrow night I have another Yom Ha'atzmaut event. But this one's gonna be a bit more organized and a bit longer. So I'm hoping to get more out of that. Also, like I said, Instagram and TikTok are the best places to connect. Twitter's also a good place to connect, because I think I live on Twitter nowadays.
Yeah, that's fair. Awesome. Well, thank you so much, Mikey Darwish, for coming on to the podcast. Thank you for telling your story. It has been such a pleasure, and I wish you well on your own road to Zion.
Thank you so much for having me, man. I appreciate it.
Of course. Everybody, thank you. Take care, and Shalom Aleichem.
Shalom, guys.